These ancient lines from Surah Sad, verses 21 through 26, present a historical account that begins with an act of intrusion. The text describes two men scaling the wall of King David's private chamber. They bypass his security and enter his presence so suddenly that the king is left terrified. The men present a case involving livestock, much like the flock shown here. One brother possesses 99 sheep, yet he aggressively demands the single, lone sheep belonging to the other. David rules in favor of the man with one sheep, but he immediately senses something deeper is at play. He realizes the entire encounter is not a legal dispute, but a divine test from Allah. The realization strikes David with such force that he drops into prostration, begging for mercy and seeking his Lord's forgiveness for a transgression. While the passage captures David's terror and his subsequent pardon, the text remains silent on the nature of his error. It documents his immense guilt without ever identifying the act that caused it. The absence of the crime leaves the narrative hollow, stripped of the very context that makes David's repentance meaningful. To uncover the specific sin, we have to trace the story back to its earliest recorded version. This older manuscript fragment from 2 Samuel contains the complete details of the event, recorded centuries before the Quranic version. The biblical account identifies the sin as an abuse of royal power. David spies on a woman named Bathsheba, the wife of one of his soldiers, uses his position to sleep with her, and she becomes pregnant. In a desperate effort to hide the adultery, David manipulates the battlefield. He sends Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, into a chaotic assault and orders his commander to withdraw the supporting troops, ensuring Uriah is struck down. David believes the cover-up is successful and marries the widow, but his actions are noted by God, who sends the prophet Nathan to confront him. Nathan uses a parable to reveal the king's corruption. He tells David a story about a wealthy man with vast herds who steals a poor man's only lamb to provide a meal for a traveler. Comparing these texts reveal mechanical changes. The left shows the original structure, the right shows the Quranic reshaping. The Quranic version removes the character of Nathan, turns the sheep parable into a literal event, and entirely scrubs mentions of adultery and murder. These are substantial modifications. The prophet, the specific crimes, and the moral context have all been excised, leaving only the outline of David's remorse. Why would the author of the Quran need to remove these specific details? Why erase the acts of killing a man and taking his wife from the historical record of a prophet? Finding the motive requires shifting our focus to the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, whose life shares specific, documented parallels with the biblical David. Historical accounts of Muhammad's life describe a consistent pattern of military conflict, followed by the acquisition of the wives of his fallen enemies. After the death of Kinana at Khaybar, Muhammad married his widow, Safiya. Following the raid of Bani Mustalik, he married Juwariya after her husband died in the fighting. This timeline maps these events as they occurred in history. The most striking parallel involves Muhammad taking Zainab, the wife of his adopted son Zayd, and subsequently sending Zayd into the Battle of Mu'tah, where he died. The biblical sins of David mirrored Muhammad's own actions with precision. By removing the specific details of David's crimes, the Quranic version avoided establishing a precedent that would have implicitly condemned its own author. This brings us to the final change, the total removal of the prophet Nathan, the man who delivered the moral rebuke to the king. The Bible depicts a king who humbles himself when faced with a harsh critique of his character. Muhammad's leadership, by contrast, was characterized by a severe intolerance for dissent. Historical records describe a violent response to opposition. When poets like Asma bint Marwan and Abu Afaq wrote verses criticizing his actions, Muhammad ordered their executions. This intolerance was codified in the Quran itself. Surah 33 established new rules regarding how the believers must relate to the prophet's authority. These verses state that believers have no option but to accept his decisions, and that those who annoy the messenger will face a humiliating punishment. A story where a lesser prophet enters a palace to criticize a supreme leader posed a direct threat to the absolute, unquestionable authority Muhammad had built for himself. The author of the Quran used ancient biblical stories to provide historical weight to the new faith, but the moral lessons were surgically altered to ensure the text never accidentally challenged the legacy or the power of the new messenger.